Now, settle in with your favorite cup of coffee, because I've got a story that'll remind you why Christmas miracles sometimes come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. It happened just last year, and I guarantee you'll never look at family dinners quite the same way again. You know how they say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree? Well, sometimes that apple rolls right down the hill and lands in somebody else's orchard entirely. That's what Joseph Taylor was thinking on Christmas Day when his son Cody stood in the doorway and delivered words that would have made Scrooge himself wince. "You're no longer part of our family. Get out." Now, Joseph was 70 years old, had weathered 4 decades of construction work, and thought he'd heard everything. But those words hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. Behind Cody stood his wife Bethany, trying to hide a smile that wasn't fooling anybody. Instead of causing a scene, and heaven knows he had every right to, Joseph just nodded, picked up his keys, and walked to his car. But here's where our story gets interesting, because that old builder had one more trick up his sleeve. One phone call, 5 minutes later, and suddenly Cody and Bethany found themselves sitting at an empty dinner table, wondering where all their Christmas guests had disappeared to. Sometimes justice doesn't come with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it comes quiet as snowfall and twice as beautiful. Let me back up a bit and tell you how we got here, because no family breaks apart in a single afternoon. It's more like watching paint peel. Happens so slowly you hardly notice until one day you're staring at bare wood. Joseph had spent his whole working life with a hammer in his hand and pride in his heart. Every nail he drove, every beam he set, was done with the kind of craftsmanship you don't see much anymore. His hands were rough as tree bark, but they'd built a life honest as Sunday morning. His boy Cody? Well, Cody had taken a different path. College educated, sharp suits, the whole 9 yards. Nothing wrong with that, mind you. Every parent dreams of their child climbing higher than they did. But somewhere along the way, Cody had gotten the notion that climbing up meant looking down on where he came from. "Dad, why can't you be like Peter?" Cody had said that fateful day, adjusting his expensive watch like it was a badge of honor. He's a real man with real money. Now, Peter Mills was Cody's father-in-law, a successful businessman who owned half of Denver's commercial district. Good man, from what Joseph could tell, but wealthy in a way that made Joseph's modest pension look like pocket change. Joseph felt something crack inside his chest, not his heart breaking, exactly, but something deeper. 40 years of double shifts and missed dinners. Also Cody could get that college education, and this was his thank you? "Those nails paid for your college education," Joseph said quietly, his voice steady as his hands on a 2x4. But Cody was already shaking his head, straightening that silk tie of his. "Peter's the one who gave me real opportunities. You've only held me back with your worker mentality." Worker mentality. As if honest work was something to be ashamed of, like having mud on your boots or calluses on your hands was a character flaw instead of a badge of honor. The conversation that followed was the kind that changes everything, like watching your favorite family photo slip from the mantel and shatter on the floor. You can sweep up the glass, but you can't put it back quite the same way. Cody laid it all out with surgical precision. How embarrassed he was when Bethany's friends asked about his family. How Peter owned commercial buildings while Joseph owned power tools. How some people were meant for bigger things. Joseph pointed to the door. "Out," he said, and meant it. After the door slammed, Joseph sank into his old leather chair, the one with a tiny hole from when 8-year-old Cody had gotten creative with a pair of scissors. Funny how that little imperfection seemed precious now, a reminder of when his son had been proud to show off his dad's toolbox to friends. That night, Joseph went through his evening routine like a man walking through fog. When had pride turned to shame? When had love become something to be embarrassed by? Outside, he heard scratching sounds on the gravel, but he was too heartsick to investigate. Come morning, he'd find his mailbox bent and battered, the kind of vandalism that wasn't random but personal. Setting the stage, you might say, for what was to come. The next morning brought coffee that tasted like ashes and a newspaper that might as well have been written in a foreign language. Joseph's mind kept circling back to that conversation, trying to make sense of how love could turn so cold. Then the phone rang. "Dad, it's me." Cody's voice had changed overnight, sweet as honey on a hot biscuit. Too sweet, if you ask me. "I've been thinking about yesterday all night, and I completely overreacted." Now, Joseph had raised that boy from diapers to diploma, and he knew when Cody was putting on a show. This apology flowed smoother than Sunday gravy, too perfect to be real. "Actually," Cody continued, "Bethany and I would like to invite you to Christmas dinner tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just family." Joseph felt something flutter in his chest. Hope, maybe, or just the stubborn love a parent can't shake even when they should. I guess I could come." "Fantastic. Oh, and Dad. Maybe wear that nice suit from Mom's funeral. First impressions matter." The line went quiet, but not quiet enough. Joseph heard voices in the background, muffled but clear enough to break what was left of his heart. "He really believed it," came Cody's laugh, sharp as broken glass. "Did you hear that pathetic hope in his voice?" "You're terrible," Bethany's voice, amused. "Though I have to admit, this will be interesting. The contrast will be perfect. Peter's successful business friends against your construction worker father." They kept talking, laying out their plan like architects drawing blueprints. They'd use Joseph as a prop, a cautionary tale to show Peter how much better they were than their humble beginnings. By evening's end, Joseph would look so pathetic next to Peter's crowd that they'd secure their inheritance for sure. Joseph set the phone down with hands that shook like autumn leaves. This wasn't about reconciliation, it was about humiliation, served up with a Christmas turkey. Now, most folks would have either stayed home or shown up ready for a fight. But Joseph Taylor hadn't spent 4 decades in construction without learning a thing or two about planning ahead. When you're dealing with unreliable materials, and make no mistake, that's what his son had become, you always have a backup plan. He found Peter Mills's business card in his desk drawer, filed neat as you please between insurance papers and warranty information. Peter had given it to him at Cody's birthday party last year with a genuine handshake and a "call anytime, Joseph. We should get to know each other better." Joseph studied that card like it held the answer to a prayer. Peter Mills struck him as the kind of man who'd built his success on straight dealing and honest work, just with different tools than Joseph used. A man like that wouldn't appreciate being used as an unwitting participant in someone else's cruelty. The phone call that followed was one for the ages. Joseph laid out the whole sorry mess, the overheard conversation, the planned humiliation, even the vandalized mailbox. He half expected Peter to think he was just a bitter old man complaining about ungrateful children. Instead, Peter listened with the quiet attention of someone who'd learned to read people like balance sheets. When Joseph finished, there was a pause that stretched like taffy. "Those aren't the values I thought I'd raised in my daughter," Peter said finally, his voice carrying the weight of deep disappointment. "And they certainly aren't the values I want to reward." They talked for another 10 minutes, two men who understood that character matters more than bank accounts, that respect isn't something you inherit, it's something you earn. By the time they hung up, they had a plan that would have made any construction foreman proud. The next evening, Joseph drove through the kind of neighborhood where the Christmas lights probably cost more than his monthly heating bill. Cody's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac like a castle, all limestone and spotlights, surrounded by cars that belonged in magazines. Joseph parked his modest Honda next to a Porsche that gleamed like a jewel. Through the massive windows, he could see the dinner party in full swing, Peter's business associates, no doubt, all dressed to the nines and ready for an evening of fine food and polite conversation. Before he could ring the bell, the door swung open with theatrical flair. There stood Cody in a suit that probably cost more than Joseph's car payment, wearing a smile that belonged in a wolf's mouth. "Well, well," Cody announced, his voice pitched to carry to the audience inside. "Look who's at our doorstep. Did you really think you belonged here today?" Bethany appeared behind him like a supporting actress, her black dress elegant enough for the opera and her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, this is precious. He really came." What followed was a performance worthy of the worst kind of theater. Cody blocked the entrance, his words designed to wound and humiliate. "Let me make this crystal clear. You are no longer family to us. Only Bethany's parents are our family now. You go away." Inside, Joseph could see the guests turning toward the commotion with the uncomfortable fascination people reserve for public embarrassments. This was their moment of triumph, their chance to demonstrate their superiority to Peter's influential friends. But Joseph surprised them. Instead of pleading or breaking down, he just nodded with the quiet dignity of a man who'd worked honestly all his life. "I understand," he said, his voice steady as stone. "Well, Cody, I hope you get everything you deserve today. Everything. He walked back to his car with unhurried steps, back straight despite the December cold. Behind him, he heard Cody's forced laughter and Bethany's delighted comments, but their words seemed distant as birdsong. Settling into his Honda, Joseph took out his phone and dialed Peter's number. When the familiar voice answered, Joseph said simply, "As we discussed." "I understand completely," came Peter's reply, carrying the weight of a man accustomed to making swift, decisive moves. "Thank you for keeping me informed." Inside that beautiful house, Peter Mills stood and raised his wine glass, drawing the attention of Denver's business elite. The room fell expectantly silent, faces turning toward their host with the anticipation you'd expect for pleasant Christmas cheer. Instead, Peter delivered a toast that cut through the evening like truth through pretense. "Friends," he began, his voice carrying the authority that had built him millions, "on this Christmas Eve, I want to talk about family values. Real values that matter more than social status or financial success." Cody and Bethany beamed, interpreting this as validation of their performance. This was it, proof that Peter appreciated their demonstration of superiority over Joseph's working-class background. "I've learned today," Peter continued with surgical precision, "about people who value money over character, who manipulate family relationships for personal gain. People who treat elderly family members as props in their schemes of social climbing." The first shadow of confusion crossed Cody's face. This wasn't the script he'd written. "I've also learned the difference between inherited wealth and earned dignity," Peter continued, his words falling like hammer blows. "Between people who build themselves up by tearing others down, and those who maintain their integrity regardless of their bank balance." Bethany's smile began to crumble as the guests exchanged meaningful glances. Peter's intention was becoming unmistakably clear. "So today, I choose to spend my Christmas with people who understand that family loyalty and basic human decency matter more than manipulation and greed." Peter set down his wine glass with finality. "I choose to leave this house and this company." The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as shock therapy. Then Peter walked to the front door with the calm determination of a man whose decision was made and whose conscience was clear. His business associates needed no further explanation. In Denver's social hierarchy, following Peter Mills was simply good sense. One by one, like dominoes falling in reverse, the guests began gathering their belongings and making polite excuses that fooled no one. Cody's desperate protests fell on ears already tuned to departure. Peter was the first to reach Joseph's Honda, his dignified stride cutting through the December air. Behind him followed the other guests, successful people who'd just witnessed something extraordinary. "Joseph," Peter's voice carried genuine warmth as he approached the car. "I believe we have a better place to spend Christmas Eve." "Indeed we do," Joseph replied, unlocking his door. "Follow me, gentlemen. It's not far." The convoy that formed was something to behold. Joseph's aging Honda leading a parade of luxury cars through the night streets of Denver like some kind of automotive miracle. In his rearview mirror, Joseph watched Bentleys and Mercedes follow his modest car with the devotion usually reserved for funeral processions, though this felt more like a celebration. They drove through Joseph's neighborhood, where modest houses wore Christmas lights like Sunday best and front yards told stories of families who knew the value of simple joys. These weren't mansions, but they were homes in the truest sense of the word. Most people, Peter said from the passenger seat, would have either avoided confrontation altogether or gone into it unprepared. You did neither. 40 years in construction teaches you to plan for all eventualities, Joseph replied, guiding his car into his driveway. Always have a backup plan when dealing with unreliable materials. The irony of calling his own son unreliable materials wasn't lost on him, but sometimes truth comes wrapped in bitter paper. As expensive cars parked along his street, looking oddly out of place yet somehow perfectly right, Joseph felt something he hadn't experienced in months, the simple pleasure of genuine hospitality about to be shared. Opening his front door felt like revealing a secret garden. Warm light poured from his modest living room, revealing the Christmas tree he'd decorated with ornaments collected over decades of marriage and parenthood. The dining table, visible through the archway, was set for 8 with his wife's finest china, beautiful table settings he'd almost forgotten he owned. My God, Joseph, Peter entered first, his gaze taking in every lovingly prepared detail. Did you really prepare all this today? Started cooking at noon, Joseph replied, helping his guests with their coats. Seemed like the right thing to do. The house smelled of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and apple pie, aromas that spoke of genuine celebration, not social performance. In the kitchen, dishes waited on counters, everything perfectly timed and ready to serve. These successful businessmen, Peter's associates and partners, moved through Joseph's house with respectful admiration. They were accustomed to luxury, but they seemed more comfortable here than they had at Cody's expensive exhibition. "It feels like Christmas," one of them commented, settling into Joseph's favorite chair. "Real Christmas, not some magazine spread." Joseph began bringing dishes from the kitchen, golden turkey carved and arranged with care, mashed potatoes made with real butter, green beans from his own garden that he'd frozen the previous summer. Peter immediately joined him, carrying serving bowls without being asked, their partnership extending naturally to domestic cooperation. The transformation was remarkable. Peter Mills, who owned half of Denver's commercial district, was helping an elderly builder serve dinner, and it felt completely natural. His partners, accustomed to five-star restaurants and catered events, praised Joseph's simple cooking with genuine enthusiasm. "This turkey is incredible," one of them said, cutting into the perfectly browned bird. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" 45 years of marriage," Joseph replied, pouring wine from bottles he'd been saving for special occasions. "My wife taught me well before she passed." The conversation flowed like good wine around shared stories of family traditions, honest work, and values that truly mattered. These wealthy businessmen found themselves relaxing, laughing, sharing memories of their own humble beginnings and the people who'd shaped their character. Peter raised his glass as the main course wound down. "Joseph, I want to thank you, not only for revealing the truth, but for reminding us what true hospitality looks like and what real family means." "Family isn't about blood or money," added another guest. "It's about the people who stand by you when it matters." Joseph slowly stood, feeling the weight of the moment. Everyone fell silent, sensing something important was about to happen. The warm light from his Christmas tree cast gentle shadows on faces that had become friends through the crucible of this strange and wonderful evening. That's when headlights appeared through the front window. 2 cars pulled up behind the others, their engines dying with the abrupt finality of desperate decisions. Joseph was raising his glass, about to offer a toast to newfound friendship, when his front door burst open without so much as a knock. Cody stormed through the living room like an invading army, Bethany close behind, both still in their expensive party clothes but now disheveled with defeat. "How dare you!" Cody's voice cracked with rage as he took in the scene. Peter and the guests comfortably seated around Joseph's modest table, wine glasses raised, faces glowing with genuine warmth. "How dare you steal our guests!" The reaction around the table was immediate and uncomfortable. Guests set down their glasses, shifted in their chairs, witnesses now to this display of privileged rage. "I didn't steal anyone," Joseph replied calmly, still holding his glass steady. "I just offered them a place where they'd be welcomed as guests, not used as props." What followed was the kind of scene that makes you believe in cosmic justice, the sort where consequences finally catch up with choices in a way that's both inevitable and deeply satisfying. Cody and Bethany pleaded, accused, and demanded, but they were speaking to an audience that had already seen behind their mask. Peter's business associates, successful people who understood the value of character, listened to their excuses with the polite attention usually reserved for children having tantrums. Peter stood with the commanding presence that had built his empire, his gaze moving between his daughter and son-in-law with a cold assessment of a man who'd just discovered termites in his foundation. "Bethany, Cody," he began, his voice carrying devastating clarity. "Today you've revealed yourselves to be exactly the kind of people I've spent my entire business life avoiding. Manipulative, greedy, and fundamentally dishonest." What came next was swift and final. Cody was dismissed from all business relations with Mills Commercial Development. Bethany's inheritance was reduced to exactly what Cody had brought into the marriage, which was precisely nothing. The bulk of Peter's estate would go to charities that understood the value of helping others without expecting anything in return. "You can't do that," Bethany cried, the words tearing from her throat. "I'm your daughter." "Yes," Peter replied, his voice carrying deep sadness beneath its firmness. "You are my daughter. And today you showed me exactly what kind of daughter you've chosen to be." They left without another word, the front door closing behind them with the finality of a book's last chapter. The silence that followed felt different from the awkward tension of their presence. It was the silence of justice served, of order restored in the most unexpected way. Peter sat back heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. "Joseph, I owe you a deep apology, not only for their behavior, but for not seeing it sooner." "No apology necessary," Joseph replied, settling back into his chair. "Sometimes we see what we hope to see in the people we love." Around the table, glasses were raised once more, this time to true family values, to the people who live by them instead of just talking about them, to second chances and the strange ways that Christmas miracles sometimes unfold. "To family," Joseph said finally, looking around the table at faces that had become dear through the crucible of this extraordinary evening. "Not the family we're born into, but the one we're blessed enough to choose." Outside, snow began to fall on the quiet neighborhood, covering the footprints of those who had left and blessing those who had chosen to stay. Sometimes the best Christmas presents come without wrapping paper, delivered by circumstances you never could have imagined and received by hearts that know the difference between what glitters and what truly shines. And that, my friends, is how an old builder taught his son that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts but in the kind of person you choose to be when nobody's watching. Sometimes the most powerful hammer you can swing is simple human decency, and the strongest foundation you can build is character that won't crack under pressure. So the next time someone tries to tell you that honest work isn't worth much, you remember Joseph Taylor and his Christmas dinner. Because at the end of the day, it's not what you own that matters. It's who you are when the lights go down and the guests go home and you're left alone with the choices you've made. Now, wasn't that a story worth telling?